two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blache and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Self-Publishing Formula Podcast with Mark and James here on a Friday. A special edition because this is the very first of our Booklab series. We've had an argument this morning over the name of this series. I said the Book Laboratory would be the proper way of calling it, but Mark's the branding expert and he says Booklab works. Like Space Lab.
I've demonstrated I can sell shit. So
yes.
You might need to believe that. That'll be the first time we've sworn in the podcast. I can sell stuff, James.
We've had swearers on.
Have we?
Yeah, Sean Platt swore straight away, like within 10 seconds at the beginning.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think anyone's fallen off their seats yet. So the Booklab. And this was, I have to say, I'm going to say this right now, this was the best idea we've had for the podcast. It's been...
Who had it?
I think I had the idea.
No, you didn't.
And then
I did.
You dressed it in your own way and said...
I'm going to swear again.
Yeah, you may have had the idea. So the idea is that we take one of our Patreon Gold supporters and we tear apart, we bring in the world's experts on various aspects of their book marketing, so the cover, the blurb, and the editorial aspect of the look inside, all the things that are key to selling and books, converting sales. And those experts pour over it and they give their feedback to the person who goes into the laboratory. And we've completed the lab. We've completed the first one. What I'm going to say at the beginning, two things. First of all is you might want to, if you're not out jogging or driving, you might want to download the PDF that goes with this because you can follow along. You can see, for instance, David has already had the feedback, so he's changed his cover, changed his blurb. Not changed it online if you're listening to this contemporaneously, but we'll do in a couple of weeks. But you can see the before and afters so the feedback makes sense to you. And I think it's really worth doing that to understand the feedback and learn from it yourself and apply it to your own books. So if you go to selfpublishingformula.com/booklab1, booklab1, all one word, but one is a digit, and you can download that PDF. The selected person was David Berens, and that's the second thing to say is if you want to be selected for this, and it is a money can't buy opportunity, you need to be a Patreon Gold level supporter. So if you go to patreon.com/SPF Podcast and sign up to support us, it's just $3 an episode. It pays for the podcast. It pays for all the equipment and time and editing that goes into this. We now have an independent editor because the editing was getting on top of me. And if you can help support us, that would be absolutely fantastic. Just $3, a cup of coffee per episode at patreon.com/SPF Podcast. And if you are gold level, you have a chance of being in the Booklab next time around. So let's start, Mark Dawson. You would have liked this, wouldn't you?
I would, yeah. When I started, it would have been very helpful. Things like cover and blurb, I was... blundering around, not really knowing what I was doing. So it was, it's a great opportunity for new authors or authors who aren't selling how they'd like to sell to get some really potentially quite expensive advice for free or almost for free. It's really good fun to see this come to life.
Okay, well, we need to rattle through these because we've got feedback from 3 people, and we're going to hear from David Berens himself, the author. So the author is David F. Berens, or David Berens, I think he calls himself with his with the book that we selected. He put forward for this. The book is called Hat Check, and you can find it obviously on Amazon. And it's the Amazon page that we looked at because obviously it's your main shop window, certainly in the United States and the United Kingdom. And we looked at the cover, we looked at the blurb that he's written, and the look inside, which is quite a big chunk of writing. So we're going to start with the cover. And if you've got the PDF or you're on Amazon, if you're in the future, a long way in the future, like more than a few weeks, you're probably looking at his new cover on Amazon. So that's why the PDF is useful to see. This is what was put in front of our cover expert, who of course is Stuart, the man who does your covers and a whole host of very, very high profile authors' covers. And this is a man who knows what he's talking about when it comes to book covers that sell books. So first of all, let's hear from Stuart Bache about his feedback on David Berens' cover for Hat Check. So, Stuart Bache, look, we get to see you.
Yes, no, here's my face.
And do you know what? I was thinking, because you always look fresh-faced and young in your photographs, but I'm thinking you've moved house. Your baby must be, 3 months old, something like that?
Yes, she's just over 3 months now, yeah.
Why haven't you aged 25 years? How come you're still looking young?
It's a really good moisturising regime. That's not a joke. No, it is sort of a joke. No,
you're a big moisturiser.
Yeah, always. Yeah,
because you're worth it.
Yeah, because that's exactly, well, that's my hair as well. That's the worth it bit.
Okay, you've got good hair, Stuart.
Yeah, it isn't bad. It's getting very grey these days, but I don't mind. But that's the baby bit, I think.
Yes,
it's the grey.
Yes,
but,
that's what the baby's done.
I just turned 36, actually. So
okay, well, you're doing well.
Yeah,
you're doing well.
Good
you're
genes,
well.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't see them, but I'm assuming they're good genes. Okay. I'll do the comedy. Now, let's crack on with this then. So we've got a brief period here to talk about Dave Berens' book, our first victim into the Booklab.
Yeah.
And if people want to follow this along, as we've said already, it's Hat to Check. You'll find it on Amazon. And I'm going to start things off by saying, at first glance, I quite like this cover.
Yeah, it's very bold. It has some really good strong colours, and actually it works quite well as a series. You can see the series on Amazon as well, and they sort of all match up really well with these really bold colours. And obviously it has the whole thumbnail theory thing, where when it's small, it sort of really stands out with the type and everything. So in that respect, the strong colours and how bold it is, it really works from a sort of eye-catching point of view.
And there's a definite thought process that's gone into the colours. When you look at the other books, there's a very definitive, this will be the orangey yellow, this will be the bluey, this will be the red, this will be the green.
And often he picks things up with the title as well. So if blue's in the title, it'll often be in the cover. It is actually thought through. It isn't just sort of whacked together, which is quite nice. Because I get the feeling he's done these himself. I think there was a point where he did hire a designer, but I think these are actually his own. And I think considering they're his own, they're very, very good and well thought through.
Okay, but you're a man with a critical eye.
Yes. Well, I think they're a really good starting point, but from a genre perspective, I was a little confused because I know that there's a bit of comedy, or I think there's a bit of sort of humor in the books. But they are sort of in the genre on Amazon anyway. They're in action adventure and crime, and there was another one as well. It was action adventure and crime fiction. That's sort of the area they're in, and it doesn't 100% fit in that personally. It's not the first thing that I think of when I see the covers. Is that it's I might get a bit of action and adventure from it, but not quite. Crime, as it were, or I know there's a kidnapping in it as well, and I think one of the genres that he's put himself in is like a sea adventure, which obviously you get that with the wave and everything, but a lot of the books that are doing quite well in that area are authors like Wayne Stinnett. And they're much more pared back. They're more sort of beautiful photography with a vehicle of some sort or a person, or that's where the narrative is coming from. But overall, if you want to catch someone's eye, he's certainly doing that.
So I mean, the Wayne Stinnett is an interesting comparison, because I guess what David would say is that, I mean, I don't think Wayne's books set out to have humour in them, do they? No. At least they're not presented like they're presented as this, as Jesse's this kind of hard-nailed ex-Marine. Whereas David he places the humour quite prominently up into what you're getting into here. I mean, I suppose there's something slightly whimsical about the way it's set out. When, again, a bit like you, we had a little chat off air. When you look at it longer, you start to see quite a lot of elements to it, and I wonder if there could be a bit more simplicity to it. Do you think? Or
absolutely, I think I can be kind of a little bit too harsh sometimes, I think, because and this is the problem with when you ask someone their opinion, they look for things. So you find an opinion. On the whole, it looks, fine, but I didn't understand necessarily what it was about. And I think maybe it's because of the hat, on the wave with the book behind it and everything. It just feels a little bit plonked on. I always look for narrative, and and it's not really telling me enough about what genre it is. It feels a little bit clip arty, a little bit in the style of the illustration, maybe. But I think I'm being overly critical, really. I think the fonts that have been used, or I think he's probably put this together in something like Word or something like that, because he's using things like Impact, and I think that's Brush. And that's fine. They're absolutely fine to use those sorts of fonts. But I always say, when you're looking at, when you start the design process, is to look at what's working out there at the moment, and what sort of fonts are being used. And, he's using a condensed font there, which is exactly right. Trade Gothic condensed, or if you can't buy fonts, then a good Google font is Fira Sans condensed. And those sorts of fonts are really, really nice, really smart. And I think there's just a lot going on. So I think if I had to say, if there's not much, if you're not going to change the whole thing, actually just a few little things could work. And maybe that's, there's a lot shouting at me at the moment. So his author name's very big. The title's very big, and I'm not sure what hits me first. They kind of smack me both in the face at the same time. So it might be about reducing one thing and making more of an emphasis of another, and then having the wave and the hat just sort of like come at you at the same time. It's a lot of things being thrown at you. Personally, this is just how I think he could sort of rework this cover, is just by paring a few things back, by sort of reducing some sizes of typography, that sort of thing. But, from a series perspective, how it works across the lot, the same illustration style with the same typography and the choice of colors, it actually works really well in that respect.
Yeah, because that is one of the issues, I suppose. If David's going to take on board some of this and make a couple of changes, he's got to do that across his series, because there is a very common repetitive theme. So is there a kind of rule of thumb here that you don't have? You either have the author name prominent and the title less prominent, perhaps if you're Lee Child, or you have the title prominent and the author name less prominent, perhaps if you're James Blache.
Yeah, or I think you can do either, or I've always said that it doesn't really matter ultimately with that respect to which way you flip it. I think if you want to have your name large, if it looks good large especially, that's fine. Mark Dawson works really well. I always say like a short name than a long name. My name wouldn't work very well because it's equal amount of letters, so almost. So it just sort of doesn't work very well on a large size like David's name does. But it's all about hierarchy. So you choose what you want to go ahead first. So if you're saying I am the brand, then you say my name first. Then it should be your title, then your subtitle, or sort of like shout line of some sort. Whether Amazon best-selling author, that kind of thing. Or the other way around. So if you choose that you want to have the title up front, then make sure that that's what hits you first, and then you do your author name, and then you do the subtitle. But there should be a hierarchy of some sort, and that should be, in respect to this, he is an Amazon best-selling author, so his name will sell the book, so maybe his name should remain the same, and then bring back the title hat check down a little bit. Mm-hmm. Or put it on one line, or keep it in the same font. I think scripty fonts work quite well for more sort of romantic and sort of women's fiction-y type stuff. I find that script fonts sort of fit better with that area of the genre.
So by that, so for those of us who don't live and breathe fonts in quite the same way that you do, Stuart, you're talking about the slightly more handwritey type fonts.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, so just like calligraphy, that sort of thing. So handwritten looking fonts. You can't get very good ones. You can buy some really good ones, but they often sort of fit with women's fiction, that sort of thing. I would say that I would probably, just because once again there's a lot of stuff going on. So I would move the word hat into the same font of whatever he chooses for the word check, and keep it as a sans serif. But I would then reduce it in size and maybe have it span the width of his surname. And then you've at the bottom, then you've got a huge amount to play with the image. And that's where the narrative is. That's what will tell you where the book fits and what genre it fits.
Yeah. So I think looking at the illustration, if we move on to that now, so we've got a bit of space now to do more with the illustration. I think at a glance it does. And I think our summary of this is probably going to be this does a pretty good job. However, it could probably be improved, which is fair enough. It's not like you're looking at this thinking this does not work. But
no, it does. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's right.
The bits where there are areas for improvement, we talked about the fonts here, and I agree with you that at a glance I think it works. And then when you look at it for a second more, you think, well, what is that hat doing? What is underneath the hat? I can't tell. And is that a fish? Oh no, that's a bit more of the wave. It is a little bit kind of.
Yeah.
I just wondered if a hat by itself on the beach with the wave in the background might tell the story a bit better, because he talks about everything changed when he picked up this hat.
Exactly, yeah.
And this hat sort of waiting there on the beach, ready to be picked up, and might be a slightly more. Although, would that take away the whimsical nature of it? I don't know.
Well, potentially, but it depends whether that's what you want to get across in the book in the first place, and is that the same throughout the series? Is this whimsy going to be something that happens throughout the series, or is it just in this book? And yes, you could do that. You could absolutely have the hat, if you could find the right image and the right setup. You could absolutely have the hat as the main focus, because that is obviously as you say, the sort of focus of the novel itself is he picks up this hat and all sorts of trouble happens afterwards. So yeah, sure, focus on it, but then the word hat is in the title, so. I mean, you could go down the direction of the Wayne Stinnett. I know it's very different, doesn't have the humour maybe, so you might lose that. I think he did do something very similar in a previous incarnation of the book, and I think I understand why he didn't think that worked, because you do lose that, as you say, that whimsical feel and the humour. So yeah, I think maybe if he does keep it, and I say the way, as I said before, the sort of wave seems to be in all of the different titles as well. So as you say, you probably have to change everything. But and we don't want to put him in that position necessarily. But it's just about thinking about composition, basically thinking about what that doesn't look real. And as my old publisher used to say to me in cover art meetings, and it used to annoy me, but I'm going to have to say it now, it kind of looks plonked on, and that's not what you want. You want it to feel like it's supposed to be there. Yeah. And obviously, I think maybe he's trying to show that the hat came in with the wave, or maybe I'm kind of, and it was found on the beach, so maybe I'm thinking too much about it. But if he's going to keep what he's got and he's using what he has and he can't do anything new, then yes, do keep the name the same, reduce the title size, and then maybe just rework the illustration a little bit more so you can see it more and you understand it a bit more. But if he has a chance to try something new, then I would go and look at some better quality illustrations and kind of think about how he wants the actual book to look like. It needs to look, from my perspective, everything needs to kind of feel as if it should be there. If it's illustration, then you can be a bit more abstract with it. But if it's photographic or it's supposed to have some sort of narrative in it, then I feel then you should know what it is straight away.
Yeah. I can see now with the wave in every cover that starts to then, I mean, it's an idea for consistency's sake, and obviously selling the series is very important commercially for writers. But then that does hamstring you a bit, doesn't it? Because you start with quite a big element of your illustration before you've done anything else. And how do you then weave a hat into it? Well, as you say, plonked on's probably not a bad description of the way it looks because of that constriction that he gave himself. Okay, well, look, let's go back to just to say again, it's a pretty good cover. It's eye-catching, orange
Absolutely.
and yellow in this particular case, and it works well. And it for me, it definitely does say humour and whimsy and adventure, kind of the humorous moments of Indiana Jones.
Yeah. And from a it does actually. Yeah, I think it's a sort of cartoony Indiana Jones, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It is. On first glance, it is very good and sort of stands out. But if you want to go a bit deeper and you want to try and make it feel like sort of a bit more commercial,
substantial,
and just to kind of think about the narrative a bit more, think about your typography a bit more, and your quality of imagery. But on the whole, as you say, I mean, it's worked, hasn't it? So
yes,
I mean, you can't say it hasn't. It's just that when you look at the rest of the genre, all the things that pop up in the genre, it actually stands out against it. And stand out is good, but it's not always number one. You know, familiarity, I tend to think, is the thing that works the best. But in this case, it's worked.
And finally, if David is going to think, well, let's give this a go, and that would involve a redesign of all his books, but that's not a bad thing to do from time to time.
No, absolutely. I mean, Mark's done it once or twice. I did his first series, and that was very stylized look, more sort of almost illustrative in a sense, with silhouettes and things. And then we completely changed it and went a more commercial route. And one day I'm sure they'll change again, or that they'll look a slightly different look. I mean, we've changed some of his covers that have done really well, but have sort of been are in existence and have been out there for ages, and now we've changed them again because it gives it a fresh look, and that's fine. That's absolutely, it's great. It's great to do, actually. It gets a new market. It hits new customers.
Okay, I think you and I are going to have a proper chat at the end of this about this, but I mean, good incisive comment from Stuart, and you're going to hear from David Berens at the end of this episode. And David did say Stuart nailed it straight away. When it's sort of one of those things. It's obvious when you hear it, but up until that point, you aren't necessarily going to see what was wrong with that cover. But despite the fact it was a pretty good effort, there were things wrong with it.
Yeah, no, it was eye-catching before, and I immediately knew it was Carl Hayson would be the inspiration for David's books. That came across from the cover. But yeah, Stuart saw some stuff that wasn't necessary and felt that it could be streamlined to make it more effective, and I think that's the case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a good. We should just say this is going out on Friday. We are in the last 5 or 6 days of the 101 course still being open. We extended it for a week because you may have noticed if you get your podcast via the app on the iPhone that you didn't get it for a couple of weeks, and we had a stumbling block. We fixed the gremlin. It's now okay. And
gremlin's name is
the gremlin's name. What we've done is extended the launch because that's how a lot of people learn about the launch, and just extended it for a week until the 28th of March. So late on the 28th of March. You can go for now till selfpublishingformula.com/SP101. And that will get you to the page. Now, the reason I mention it is because Stuart does a session in there, as does Bryan Cohen, who is our next person to feedback. So Bryan Cohen is the Blurb Meister, and he had a look at David's blurb, which again is on the PDF, or if you're looking at it right now at the time of the podcast going live, is still in place on Amazon. I can tell you David Berens is itching to replace it, as you'll find out in a minute. But let's hear what Bryan made of David Berens' blurb for his book. Bryan Cohen, welcome back to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. How delightful to see you this time. So I think this might be the first time, if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see Bryan in all his glory.
All my nursery glory.
The star of Illinois. You are in a nursery. You've got some lovely sort of, are they like Japanese type fans on the wall, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually that was repurposed decorations from the baby shower of my daughter from, she's 13 months now, so maybe 15 months ago. Okay. And we just said, hey, those look kind of nice on the wall. And so we have those. Obviously, there's a bookshelf, Curious George, and other wonderful books there for Riley. So, yeah, and this is also my office. So we lovingly refer to it as the Noffice, the nursery office.
I like it. And if you're naughty, you both get sent in there. And we should just say that Riley, we may hear Riley because she's being tended to with with viruses and bacteria and stuff that's flying around next door. So we can't.
Hooray for winter.
Hooray for winter. Okay. All right, let's crack on with this. So we are analysing, looking at, exploring, pulling apart a little bit and putting back together again David F. Berens' book, his presentation on Amazon. We've done the look inside. We've looked at the cover. the blurb. First of all, before we start, you're a bit of a blurb nerd, which I think is hopefully is a polite expression. Why is the blurb so important, Bryan?
Well, we need to think of this like a product that we're selling online. Obviously, it's a book that we care about deeply when we are working on a book and we post it on Amazon. This is something our heart and soul is in, and I don't mean to diminish that at all by saying that this is a product, but products have sales pages, and we are optimizing it with our cover, of course. And obviously people do judge a book by its cover, but there are other things that these browsers on our Amazon or Kobo or Apple sales pages, there are other things that they judge our book by. And one of those things is our book description. We want to make our book sound good. We want to make it sound like something that is part of our genre and something that readers would really want to check out if they like this kind of book. And so we have an opportunity here to just make it an easier decision for them by having a book description that sounds really fantastic.
Yeah. And Jenny Parrott talked about the 2 seconds or so that, the browser settles their eyes on the page. And I guess within those 2 seconds, you've got this chance if the cover's done its job, the title's done its job, their eyes flick down to the copy pretty quickly, down to the blurb, and start reading it. So you're in a very tight zone here to capture this sale. Hence, I guess you're going to say every word is important.
I think of it almost like poetry in that we need to make sure every word has its purpose. We have nothing extraneous here, and that can scare authors because it's definitely a different kind of writing than writing the words in your book. These are the words outside of your book, and they need a lot of attention for sure. It's
a great irony, isn't it, that you write this 100,000 words that you may spend, in my case, best part of a decade sweating over in normal authors, a year or so. And yet suddenly it's really down to these 50 words or so, which are going to make all that worthwhile or not. So, okay, well, that said, you've had a good look at this and you've actually sent me in advance, and we'll give a link out in a minute if people want to download this themselves, a kind of before and after version of the blurb. So why don't I ask you first of all what you thought of the blurb?
I actually think that David's first blurb had some really nice things going for it, especially with the tone, because this is a madcap Florida thriller with a lot of comedic elements. And I think that David really pulled that off with kind of some silly details in here. We've got this main character who's just kicking back to fish, and then he found a silly hat with a peacock feather in it, and he looked Matthew McConaughey good. And those are all really funny elements. And I think that those aspects of the tone really work. What I think we miss out a little bit on is that setting up this character as a character in not just a comedy, but a comedy thriller. And these genre mashups are sometimes difficult to portray. How much thriller do we include? How much comedy do we include? And we need to make sure we're playing to the base. There are a lot more thriller readers than there are comedy readers, which is unfortunate. I'm a former improv comedian myself, so I know this all too well. But we want to make sure that we get readers who are interested in this genre to be interested enough in both the character and kind of the cliffhanger of where the character is when we leave them at the end of this description. We want to make sure they're interested enough in those couple of things to go click that buy button.
Okay. Now, people can follow along, as we've been saying through this podcast. If you go to Hat Check by David Berens on Amazon, you can read the blurb. We're going to ask him to keep everything in place, at least until this podcast has gone out. And then if he wants to, he can take some of the advice that's been handed out. So you think it did a good job. And the Matthew McConaughey, I actually quite like that. And I mentioned that to Jenny because whilst not everyone's read Carl Hiaasen and so on, you can certainly compare yourself with the other. That's a very important thing to do. Matthew McConaughey, kind of that transcends a lot of people will be familiar with him. And it does evoke a certain quirkiness I thought fitted quite well to this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that details like that are fun. In my version, obviously, if you guys can see the version on the site and follow along with it, you'll see that my team and I did end up extracting that version. But as I always say, nobody is perfect in their creation of these things. If you work on a blurb, try to decide on it, maybe even post it for a couple weeks, and you see, hey, maybe the sales aren't as high as I want them to be, you can tweak these as much as you want. This is one of the joys of being a self-published author. You can tweak the inside of the book as much as you want and tweak the outside of the book as much as you want and see where you end up. I tend to leave out more specific details like the quirky Matthew McConaughey thing because I don't want to accidentally find this cross-section of 40% of people who like madcap Florida thrillers who don't like Matthew McConaughey. You want to avoid offending people or losing some people here and there. So that's why I tend to go more top-down, more vague, less specific, in order to try to appeal to as many people as possible. But hey, this is the quirky details that you want to include in these. You may as well try them because it's worth a shot. Yeah,
and testing and not thinking that the version you write is the final one that lives there forever. Have a look and start tweaking. Okay, so I think that I'm not going to read out both blurbs. It would take a while to do that. People should look this up, and we will give out the a URL hopefully by now that people can download the blurbs and other bits from this dissection. But he started with, I think, a fairly traditional sentence, headlining with the character Troy Clint Bodian, had everything he needed for some peace and quiet, a good fishing pole, a pickup truck, a beach house on a small island in South Carolina. All was right in the world until he found the hat, a straw cowboy hat, and then a little bit of detail and stuff, and he ends up then moving into the comparison of other authors. You have started an unlucky hat, an unsolved murder, one man's trash is another man's death warrant. Now, I have to say, that is a signature Bryan Cohen opening, which is, you can recognize your style, but it's straight away, I have to say, and I hope David will think the same, that is a more compelling, snappier opening than David was able to do, and I would probably be able to do in the first draft. Do you think, just before we go on, do you think it's easier to write a blurb for somebody else than to write it for yourself?
I think that it is easier. I think that you have a little more distance from it. With obviously, I have a business that writes book descriptions, Best Page Forward, and we don't ask to read the book because, one, it would take a long time, and we would probably have to charge much more because it would be that many hours that we would have to put in. But also, I think that getting kind of a more step back view, the bird's eye view of things, it allows us to focus on what's important. And I'm coming around that this is with a lot of help from my co-writer, Abigail Denard, who also helps out with the Sell More Book Show. She has put this quite eloquently that you're not trying to take an 80,000 word book and condense it into the 50 to 100 words here. That would be too hard. That would be too complex. And it's much easier to condense the 80,000 words into something different and then use the smaller compact version to create the description or to create a Bryan Cohen style headline, as you put it. Every book has one main conflict if it's fiction, or it has one main takeaway if it's nonfiction. And obviously books have lots of conflicts or lots of takeaways. But if you can say, what is the number one conflict in this book? It's that Troy Clint Bodine has found a hat that makes him look fantastic, but there are people who want to kill him for wearing it. And that's really a conflict here, obviously, because he wants to fish and people are trying to kill him for wearing this hat. And so this headline is based not on the entirety of the book. It's based on this conflict. And that is a much easier way to condense something that's very big into first that headline, and then keeping in mind, well, we're not trying to explain the entire plot here because it's too hard. The brain explodes from just the attempt of that. But if we base it on this conflict, if we base it on what really the main crux of the book is and what genre readers who like this kind of story would appreciate, then we are going to have a lot easier time of handling it. Yeah.
I wonder if a good exercise to try and get that right, where you don't have the emotional baggage of it being your baby and trying to tell the whole story, is to write the blurb for another book, a book you know well, book you've written, so Pride and Prejudice or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in my case. Write a blurb for that, because you've obviously got a bit more distance to that and get into the habit, and then look at that and think, well, let's take that same neutrality, that slight distance where you're just thinking about selling the book to your own book, just as an exercise. So yeah,
I agree. Like anything, it's a muscle you have to build, and so I would absolutely recommend that exercise.
Okay, and we've got the rest of your blurb here. Again, I'm not going to read it out, but I like the way it layers. It layers it up, so you're basically saying, okay, if you're still reading this, you're up for a little bit more, and it takes you one sentence to the next. Each sentence is carefully crafted here, and it looks and feels like that. Quite short sentences as well, which I like, and then a kind of ... at the end of the conflict description, if you like, the hook. Mm-hmm. Then you've got a penultimate paragraph, which is a little bit description about the book. First book by Troy Bodine, Adventures, series of hilarious island thrillers. That's where, in fact, funnily enough, up until that point, and I can see this is a deliberate thing, up until the word hilarious, it wasn't completely clear that this was a comedy. You have really gone with that thriller, that intrigue first. There are some quirky elements in there that might just hint at it not being a straightforward dark noir thriller, but you don't spell it out until that penultimate sentence. That's obviously deliberate.
Yeah, I think that we need to almost subconsciously, in a way, start telling the reader that this is not just a straight thriller. We have some puns, in a way. There's the line, Troy wonders if his favorite new fishing hat could throw him overboard. We have, if he can't crack the case soon, instead of catching bass, he'll be swimming with the fishes. These are not the kind of lines I would use or that my company would use for a straight thriller, because it's silly. Now, it's not hit over the head silly, but it is silly. And so to realize that this is going to have funny elements and it's a thriller, we try to clarify that towards the end, because there are turning points in a description. The first line, some people will make a decision on buying after the first line. Some people will make a decision after reading the synopsis and ending with that ... But if people haven't made a decision to buy at that point, we need to start telling them, well, what are they going to get out of this book? Because they're still reading this. So they still haven't made a decision. So we need to make it clear, this is a funny book with thriller elements. There are some things, madcap murder mysteries, gripping suspense, zany characters, that if you like those things, you'll love this. And then that it's a rollicking thrill ride at the end. And if they haven't made a decision by then, well, maybe they'll look at some more of your customer reviews. But you want to give them the opportunity to know this is what the book is. And this is why we think you should get it. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to allow people to download these before and after as an example of how this works. And we'll find out what David thinks. I have to say, he's completely up for this analysis. He's very excited about hearing everything. And who wouldn't be from these experts? But I think, our point about this is to use the specifics of one book, and we'll do this at least 2 more times this year, to try and talk in more general terms about the importance of this. And I think you've done that well, David. Bryan, you're not David. In particular, this concept of people, of almost hurdles people are coming up to. How do you get them over? How do you get them onto the cover? How do you get them off the cover onto the blurb? How do you get from the blurb to the buy it now, to stick it in there? And you've got to look at it like that. You can't be slack at one point. You can't think, I'll be slightly self-indulgent. Every word is critical, and it's a numbers game, right? So a few thousand people browse your webpage. You need to get that small percentage as big as possible for conversion.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a small percentage increase of sales when you improve the cover, small increase in percentage of sales when you improve the blurb. You make those tiny incremental changes, and they really do add up.
Yeah. Bryan, until our next one, thank you very much indeed. From Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and this was so fun to work on. I can't wait to work on victim number 2 somewhere down the line.
Yeah, look, we really hope that all the bugs and illnesses in the Cohen household are eradicated shortly.
Me too. We'll keep going to the pediatrician until they give us the right cocktail.
Yeah, get those drugs, get those meds. Brilliant. Thanks, Bryan. So I think that was probably the most significant feedback. I mean, it's not to belittle the cover's absolutely huge, but significant in that the way David marketed and placed this book was not optimal. And that's something that Bryan nailed very early on. And he basically said, go for the mass market. So you've got a thriller that's got comic elements in it, sort of comic thriller. So if you start with that, you've immediately narrowed down your potential audience to people who think they only like comic thrillers. And what you need to do, as Bryan made obvious, is go for the huge market, which is thrillers, and then start narrowing it down later. So you've already got people drawn in. And Bryan's blurb is fantastic. I mean, we're huge fans of Bryan and the way he writes his pithy blurbs anyway, but I loved his delivery in this, and David fell over himself when he read it.
Yeah, Bryan knows what he's doing. He's written lots of blogs. He's written a couple for me, actually. So he certainly knows what he's doing. And that's really good advice to go slightly wider, so to make your targeting thriller readers, because then you'll catch people who like Carl Hayes. So obviously he writes those kinds of funny thrillers. But then also you get people like Elmore Leonard's fans who, Elmore Leonard wrote not necessarily funny books, but there were moments of lightheartedness for sure in most of his books. So by widening the scope of the blurb out just a little bit, David's able to encompass those as well. So he's potentially fishing in a slightly larger pool. So that was very wise advice from Mr. Cohen.
Yeah. And on the PDF, you can see the before and after, and it's quite striking, those two differences of that copy. Okay, so the final bit of feedback, and most difficult in a way, is for our resident editorial expert, Jenny Parrot, who's has done some great interviews on the podcast in the past. And Jenny looked at the look inside. We were trying to work out in the interview with David, somebody will know this, how much the look inside is. He thought it was 10% of the book. Seems like a lot to me, but it is a lot of pages in the look inside. I'm not sure how they cut off at what point. But anyway, there's a decent chunk of book there. We've reproduced that on the PDF as well, as it was at the time that it was submitted to Jenny. And this was Jenny Parrot's editorial feedback on the opening few pages of David Berens' book, Hat Check. Okay, Jenny, first of all, welcome back to the podcast, because I have to tell you, your appearance was one of the highlights of the podcast in the last year or so. We had so many compliments about that. People lapped up the way that you spoke very incisively about writing and story and narrative. So welcome back.
Oh, well, thank you very much for saying. It's lovely to be back. And I wasn't expecting to start off with that. So how nice.
No, it's absolutely true. There's lots of requests to get you back to do a proper chat, which I know you're snowed under with work at the moment. At some point in the next year, we'll get you back.
Happy to come back.
Great. And we've given you I was just saying off air that Bryan Cohen's looking at the blurb and Stuart's looking at the cover of this book. You've actually got quite a difficult task because it's not really an editor's role to look at 8 pages of a book and give critical feedback. But I suppose it is a consideration in this day and age where there is this look inside element. So suddenly it does become an almost added extra how the beginning of your book works.
I mean, the thing is, you get probably 5 seconds for a grazer on Amazon to be hooked. So the whole package has to be right. And I think it can be quite hard to get over to authors and actually some publishers just how crucial that is. So that starts completely from the metadata that is put in, how people discover the book, the keywords that are fed in. But it also means that everything's got to make sense instantly. And that isn't always very easy to do.
No, so there's got to be a clarity. Every small thing has got to immediately convey what it is, like the genre, whether it's humorous or the rest of it. So you don't have a lot of scope. So, and as Stuart sort of says this in the cover, it's not a time to be clever.
Absolutely not.
Subtle.
It really, really isn't. And I mean, I think what often happens, particularly with cover designs, is authors get very hooked on how they want their cover to look, but they don't realise what it looks like if someone's searching on their phone on Amazon. And that's the thing, you know, make it easy for someone to want to at least press on your button to go inside your sales pitch to see if they do want to buy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that said, what did you think of David F. Berens' presentation of Hat Check?
Right. What I thought was he's done it for the US market, and what he needs to realise is that territories are different. So for me, instantly, I was thinking the cover looks too American. The blurb isn't too bad, but he needs to get a couple, or at least one sort of British writer as a comp writer. When
you say a comp writer,
yes. So he references Carl Hiaasen. I did make the note of the others, which I think it's Tim Dorsey and Randy Wainwright, neither of which I've read, but the Randy and Tim, neither of them are published straight into the British market. So you're buying through the US publisher. And so that just isn't as appealing for British writers. If you click on their book pages on Amazon, you know, you wouldn't necessarily go there. So, you know, I mean, I think David, actually, I think his writing's fine. You know, I can completely see that people who enjoy Carl Hiaasen would like him. But, you know, he just got to get a bit more market smart.
I did like the way he mentioned Matthew McConaughey in the description.
Absolutely.
Because that's universal, isn't it? And
absolutely. And Matthew's been in True Detective. You know, he's hip at the moment. He's a bit current. You know, he won an Oscar a couple of years ago, you know, and I think it's well, I'm thinking he did win an Oscar, I think. But
that translates, doesn't it, to the UK and probably Spain and France and Australia and New Zealand as well?
Absolutely, yes. So, you know, but then you get a bit further down the page and you see that the author hasn't populated his author page other than to put a photograph on there. So under the book description, there's a biography, which is very tennis based. It's not talking really about his writing, what he's doing with his books. But then the other page, which the authors have to fill in themselves, where you can link into your various books, all he's got is a photo there. Yeah. Where, you know, that is the opportunity for him to kind of set out his manifesto. I love to write, you know, books set round rivers or, you know, whatever it is. Years of reading Carl Hiaasen made me wonder whether I could do the same. Okay. And at that point, you can put in your own website and those links. So the reason being is you want to engage your readers, and it is harder in a different country. So, some of those smaller, almost domestic seeming details, they might be the thing that makes some people want to read one of his books.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I can see that. And just looking at his page, you're quite right. In fact, there's even that slightly embarrassing thing saying, "Are you the author? Why not fill in these details here?" So obviously, he hasn't clicked on that and done that yet. So
absolutely. And that is something that all writers need to do. And actually, a lot of people, even when they're published, their publishers don't tell them that is the page for them to fill in.
Yes.
And to control. So people get so hooked.
Well, you'd think for that 82%, they might fill that in for them.
It doesn't work like that. You see, and also because it's sort of in my own life as a writer, I publish under 2 pseudonyms, so with different publishers. So neither would have access to that. And so, particularly with crime writers, say, it could be in 10 years' time, someone like David would have 4 publishers. Or you go to different imprints or whatever. And so you need to be kind of like in control. So that is the slot where you display your whole career.
Yeah.
But it is different to the author biography that is linked into that specific book.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of the writing, Jenny, I mean, actually, the look inside apart, what would you say to somebody in general terms about the opening pages of your novel?
Right. What has happened, and we cannot escape this, is that since people have been reading on devices, people give up much earlier. It's a difficult line to walk because I think, in a way, if for people who are reading in a genre and they're very familiar with it, the start that tries to pull you in, but it's very abrupt, very deliberately shocking, those get to seem samey after a while. On the other hand, you do not have 20 pages to gently tempt your author. If you're a literary writer or if you're an established writer already, those rules grow. You have a fan base that wants to read you and wants to return. But what you want is you want to engage your readers, you want to interest them, and you want them to turn the pages. But you don't want to seem like 100 other books.
Yeah. So this James Bond opening, the fire and fury, that's you think becomes a bit repetitive?
I think it can do. So I was at an event this week, and they had 5 debut novelists who had just been published this month reading, and nearly all of them did the first bit of their books. And actually, it was no surprise that C.J. Tudor, whose novel The Chalk Man sold for a 7-figure advance in the UK. I mean, it is a phenomenal book. But it's no surprise, I think, that her intro really made you want to go on.
Right.
And
what, was it intriguing or?
It just set up. It just talked about a dead body in a wood in a really imaginative way, okay. And it also then set up the story. So it's a dismembered body in the wood. And then somebody, because this bit of the story is sort of 30 years before the action of the book, but somebody who is in the later section takes just the head. And so the bit ended with a sort of quite philosophical paragraph talking about, the police and their investigation and the body being put back together on the table in the morgue, except the head, which is never found. And you just think, I want to know.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
A very, very clever one. There was another crime writer there called Will Ding with a book called Dark Pines. And he's a British writer living in Sweden. And he's written a Scandi noir novel, written from the point of view of a deaf woman journalist. So he's broken lots of rules here. And that book starts with a moose attacking this journalist in her car in the middle of a forest. And again, only at the end does it kind of move on to a slight hint that this is going to be a crime story. But what it does do is give you this really, really atmospheric, dark, threatening atmosphere.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I mean, I was just going to say, I know what you'll end up saying is basically the rules that apply to why somebody wants to read your book will apply just in the same way to these first few pages. It's just that you've got to use a lot more skill to somehow
absolutely. You've got to be a kind of people whisperer. You've got to understand the psychology of how people read. And I think what happens with most writers, because you've spent hours and hours in front of your screen, you're really invested in your book, and you naturally think other people will be invested in your book. And for people who really do believe that, I really would recommend going to a supermarket and watch people grazing, or W.H. Smith's. People lift a book up, no, back.
Wow.
And it's kind of the same. And online, that if you key in, I don't know, Florida detective humour in Amazon, I'm sure you get a whole host of writers up. And why? So what you have to say, if you're David Berens, what can I do to make sure it's mine they want to click onto? Okay,
well, let's talk a little bit before we finish about the actual writing. So in these early pages that we can see in the look inside, we meet two characters. The first one is a kind of aspiring politician, and there's a fairly gripping opening. It is a bit of a Bond opening scene with and I do like the opening line about tasting the gun barrel in his mouth.
Yeah, no, I actually, from wearing my publishing hat, this whole opening section I have no criticisms with at all. This is a pacey writer. He writes well. He's good with dialogue, and everything kind of feels the right length. So there's not a massive information dump. There's, you literally, an energy is set up that is kept going forward. And actually, that is something that I would encourage all writers to think about, is to try and keep the tempo moving, because that's what makes people want to read. And he knits in characters very quickly. So you've got the person who gets murdered, you've got the police coming in, then you've got the people that find the body, and then you've got the young woman who kind of fancies the I can't think what it's called now, Troy. Yeah. And, and you've built the character of Troy up. And so this author actually is quite a good masterclass on getting a lot going quite soon. He really did make me think of Carl Hyacin for that. And you see what then happened, certainly in Carl Hyacin's case, that then you can get almost into a kind of like madcap caper, because you're just really organised. Yeah. And so other writers who do it, anyone who wants to write in this genre, I would say read Elmore Leonard's Get Shorty and whatever the other one is that's back to back with that. Yeah. And is it Back Out or something? Anyway, I can't remember.
Yeah. Listen to me or talk to me or something, isn't it? What is it now? Yeah, it's the line. It's the line that's repeated in Get Shorty is the name of the next novel, but I can't remember it now.
Yes, that's right. Because
look at me
again. That's it. Yeah.
Look at me.
I think.
Was it? Oh, anyway,
I can't remember. But actually, this is one of those things to show that titles kind of, they're a double-edged sword. Get Shorty, what a brilliant title. Yeah. Everyone remembers that. We're groping for the one that's a bit difficult. I don't like the title Hat Check because it feels a bit 1940s black and white, 1930s black and white musical to me, or otherwise you're thinking Hat Check Girls, Soho Jazz Club.
Yeah. It's a bit incongruous, isn't it?
Yes, and so you can see right from the off why it's called hat check. A hat is involved, and it's literally got a check in it. But of course, that's a pun that doesn't work brilliantly in British because we spell check differently.
But you also needed to have read the book to get the title. And I was told when I was coming up with title for my debut novel, not to put any kind of in something that only made sense when you read the book doesn't make sense as a title.
Yeah. I mean, everybody can name titles that shouldn't make sense, and they've become iconic because that book sold many hundreds of thousands. But most books don't sell anything like that, and titles are really crucial. And the other thing about hat check is it doesn't say it's crime.
Yeah.
And that is something that you kind of ideally would, you'd want to be nodding towards that genre a bit.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Particularly these days.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with you about the writing and the look inside. For what it's worth, it really matter what I think. But I did think that it's quite difficult for me. I'm quite, I don't know what it is, but you need to get to like a character. Something has to happen. It usually takes me longer, I think, than most people to feel. But actually, by the end of this 10 pages, whatever it is, I really liked Troy, and I loved the moment of the boat kept chasing him. Going, get out of that. Really did a lot of character building very quickly.
Yeah, that's it. In fact, this author did a kind of a absolutely brilliant example of that, and it shows how deftly character can be built, not using very many words, and he does it through showing rather than telling. So the guy sitting on it's very visual, the writing, so you see kind of what he's like. He's sitting there, and and he's looking around, and there's the boats and the water, and then it just suddenly all starts going a bit wrong. But then it's kind of going right for him, but he doesn't realise this. He's got the presumably hot girl watching him, that the hat's coming his way that's got this huge amount of money tucked in the place that presumably he's going to discover later on. And it's very engaging. He doesn't seem two-dimensional. He seems like a real person in a way, or a real person in a film. Kind of, you can imagine, Matthew, I don't know how you say
McConaughey,
McConaughey.
Quirky, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I thought he did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
Good. So do you, just to round off, I mean, is the look inside something that's come across your table before? Has anyone ever asked you about it, specifically about the beginning of the novel?
Yes. Now, the problem, actually, what I would have done with this author, I would have moved the pictures of the other books, there's an acknowledgements bit. I'd put all of that at the back.
Yeah.
Don't waste your pages on something that, no one cares whether you're dedicating your book to your cat, or whatever. I mean, he hasn't, but it doesn't matter him thanking his agent or whatever he does. People, and if the book is good enough, at this point, you don't need to advertise the others, because once people have read the book, they'll find the others. And, if you're not hooking them in enough, they're never going to read those other books anyway. So I would always say, just get on with it. I'm
pretty certain in a moment Mark's going to say exactly that as well. I think he's already picked that up. So, yes, I mean, there's a mailing list sign up, but that's about it. But Mark's the same. Acknowledgements, dedications, who cares, to be frank? You care.
Absolutely.
I care in my book, and I desperately want to say thank you to people. But all the advice is stick that at the back. Get on with the book.
Stick it at the back, yeah. And I mean, in real, print books, you get the I can't remember what it's called now, like the copyright page.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that's where authors, that there will be a link right at the start to their website or whatever. But you can always put it in again at the back. But I think a lot of people, you can tell in print editions if there's lots of pages at the front, it's because of printing the way that works, because all books are printed in bundles of pages of 16 pages. So if
the way they fold.
Yes, it's called quires, I think. But if, say, all your multiples of 16 are there, and then you get a 1, then suddenly you're thinking, I don't want to have 15 blank pages at the end, and that's where you might sort of spread things out. But often by paperback, there's been a bit of wriggling, and you're just literally one page. Oh, we're starting now.
Yes.
So
okay.
So that can be a difference between your first publication, your second. So
brilliant.
Okay.
Jenny, thank you so much. Incisive feedback as always. I'm sure David will appreciate that. And I think I'm really pleased also that you did take a holistic look at it, because it's a bit unfair to say to you, just talk about the writing here, because you're absolutely right. It's a presentational matter that goes together in those precious seconds.
Completely, yes. So I would say the balance of the presentational to the writing probably is 60 or 70% presentation, 30% writing. And actually here, he's done, and it absolutely kind of does what it sets out to do. I would think he could have a really good career, if not necessarily a worldwide good career, but certainly a good career in America if he, just tightens.
There's some tweaking to do, isn't there? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's useful.
The rest of it. But the reason he might not translate, necessarily across the world brilliantly is it's so American specific.
Yeah.
And because it feels a bit like Carl Hiaasen, that might be a problem long term. But that doesn't mean you can't come up with another series, or that just kind of has that way of,
slightly more international, accessible. Brilliant. So that was Jenny, somebody else who nailed a few key points quite early on, and straight away to say that both Jenny and I really liked the look inside. It's a really well written book from its early glimpse. You got a lot of character. That's the trick, isn't it? To get people to have empathy with the character and want to know more about it. And I thought he did all of that straight away, and Jenny thought he did as well. But Jenny picked up a few points about whether it was going to travel internationally, and I think that David is going to make some changes to that as well.
Yeah, I liked it as well. I mean, I without giving away too many trade secrets, I picked this book for the first of the Booklab segments, and I thought it was certainly highly proficient. I like the sample as well. David's a good writer. I just felt that it needed a bit of tweaking, and that's what Jenny has been able to do for him. So, looking forward to seeing what changes he makes when he gets a chance to sit down at his laptop and make those amendments.
Yeah, well, I think it's time to hear from the man himself then, David Berens, who's actually a tennis instructor in Tennessee. And he has been thrilled, to say the least, as you will find out in a moment. So let's hear from David, who's had all the feedback. He's read it. He's already, at the point we did this interview just a couple of days ago, he's revised his cover. He's revised his blurb. I think he's taken word for word, effectively, what Bryan said. But let's go through it with David now. So, David F. Berens, here you are, in the flesh.
Finally.
You've been our first victim. How did it feel?
It was great. It's fantastic. A little bit nerve-wracking at the beginning, but everything turned out fine. Everything was great, and I learned a lot from all these guys. So, well appreciated for sure.
Yeah, well, I think it's been a really good thing. I have to say, Mark had a good idea with this Booklab, and as we started to do the interviews, I think just the devil's always in the detail in every walk of life, right? You can talk in general terms. You've got to have a great cover. The devil's in the detail. So when you start to get experts looking at specific things, you learn. And well, should we start with it? I mentioned the cover there in passing. Should we start with the cover then? So
sure.
You had this cover for Hat Check, which we showed to Stuart, and Stuart gave his sort of feedback that it looked a little bit cartoonish in places. And Stuart's always one who looks at, what is this cover telling me about the genre expectation of the book? And he felt there was a little bit of a mismatch there. How did you feel about that feedback?
I agree. And that was part of the struggle that I've had for the entire publication of this book, because there is a bit of a genre mashup there. And, you've got elements of thriller and elements of humor. And so drawing that line is pretty tricky. And I had 2 professional covers done. And the first one I got back was pure romance, bare-chested Troy, the whole bit. And, turned that down. Of course, that wasn't at all what I needed. So went back to them and they sent me a silhouette of Troy and sort of a sunset scene in the back. And that was passable. And then I kind of gave up on designers because I was obviously going in the wrong direction with those guys, and their work was great, but it was like a really tough thing to nail down what I needed. And so it was funny because the interview started with Stuart, and you said something like, we're going to go down and, sort of deep dive into Dave's cover. And he got this like really maniacal grin on his face. I thought, oh no, here it comes. But he made some incredible points, and in going through that, I was able to see what I needed to do with the cover much more clearly than I had done before. So, the main thing was that he said, I think he said it 10 times, if not more. So he says narrative. I wanted a narrative from the cover, and though my cover was, attractive and bright and fit the genre and all of that, I think I was definitely missing out on narrative. And so I went back and, of course, redesigned it with some of his tips in mind.
Yeah. So originally we had this wave and the hat and the book. I can't remember now since we did the interview. What is it underneath the hat? So that is one of the problems with the cover. I'm looking at your original cover now, still trying to quite disassemble it. So you did a bit of work having listened to the interview, and you've already sent over to me and to Stuart your reworking of it. And I think Stuart's already given you some feedback on that, hasn't he?
He has. I emailed him and said, hey, this has turned it around. And I think one of the points he made was, I was looking at it from a thumbnail point of view, and I literally designed my cover for a thumbnail size. And so when you look at it, you can see the name is huge, the title is huge, the elements in the middle are huge. And he said, things are competing with each other. Yeah. So obviously it's more illustrated, and I think I was leaning into the humor element maybe a little too much. And that I went back with the thought that, and he was very kind to me and said, "Oh, Dave must be a bestseller," and this book has been very successful for me, but it's not enough probably for my name to sell the book or to sell my work. So I decided that the title would be much more important and should dominate the top rather than my name. So I sort of flipped those two, and then he talked about the clip arty look to it, and I did that intentionally because again I was leaning into the humor more than I was the thriller aspect. And luckily he said, don't sell yourself short. You might be, going into that niche genre too much. And people might be turned off that might otherwise read a thriller. And I think a great example of that for me was I went back and looked at some covers of thriller writers who had elements of humor, but they weren't full on Carl Hyacin or zany works, and said, what do their covers look like? And so I worked on it from there with a much more photographic element, even though I still made it illustrate some. I still gave it some illustration look, and tried my best to create a narrative. And that's where Stuart, I think, led me in the right direction. And I think it looks a lot less, he said, plunked on. So, the elements come together a lot better.
It looks great. It looks terrific. I love the new cover, and I agree with Stuart that it's a huge improvement. This was, I think, an initial try. Are you going to stick with this, or have you made some modifications to the one that people can see on the PDF we're giving out?
I've polished it a little bit, but not something that you would notice. There are parts that I wanted to stand out a little more, or not be so dim in the background. I changed some of the lighting, but for the most part, that's the way it'll appear, and it'll guide the look of the series now too.
I was going to say my final question on the cover really is the series, because one striking element of the original covers, and a really positive element, is very identifiable, and you use colours very well there. Changing one cover means you've got to change them all.
Yeah, and it was a good experience because I had the layout of the first one done. I had fonts and things all chosen, and he made mention of my fonts that were bad. And again, I chose those from a standpoint of a thumbnail. And so I chose the biggest font I could get, the boldest font I could get. And maybe that wasn't the best way to go. So I still tried to stay true to, I wanted to be able to recognize everything in the thumbnail, but I tried to he mentioned a couple of fonts, and I did use those. And once I had that layout kind of set, it was easy to go through the covers and say, okay, again, what's the narrative? What's the major element? Not try to get all the elements in there. And again, sort of stick with that same theme throughout. And instead of the background of the color of the cover being a major color, I now made the title bring out that color. So if hat check is sort of orange, the part of the title's orange, and part of my name is orange. And in the next one, ocean blue, the background, of course, is blue. So part of the title is blue, part of my name is blue. So I carried the theme together with the colors in a different way. So it's really neat. It's a pretty cool experience.
Nice. You've got a nice eye for design. And so you feel that you've learned something, not just specifically about these covers, but you've learned something about cover design through this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Stuart nailed it. As I listened to him, I was like, oh my goodness, he is spot on. And he's obviously a professional. So when I was watching some of the footage that you sent me of him, I thought, why did I not see this? But that's what he's so good at. And his guidance led me in a way that I could make a cover, again, on my own, so that I took elements from his expertise and was able to make, I think, a much better cover. And I hope, it's been excruciating not to launch it, but I hope it comes across really well.
We appreciate the fact you've held off until this moment. It's probably a good time to mention Stuart's cover design course, which is available at selfpublishingformula.com/design. Would be remiss of me if you want to learn directly from the master on that. Okay, let's move on, because there's something on this cover which leads us to the next point. You can see a little bit of kind of tagline, I guess it is, above your author name, which says, an unlucky hat, an unsolved murder, one man's trash is another man's death warrant. What a natty bit of blurb. How did you come up with that? So let's talk about the blurb and what you got from Bryan Cohen.
Yeah, Bryan is obviously another genius at what he does. And it's so funny because, we talked about it. I agonized over the blurb. Writing the book, no big deal, right? That's an understatement, but writing the book was much easier than the blurb. And boy, again, listening to him talk about it, I was like, oh, what was I thinking? Why didn't I think of that? And his major point was, what's the conflict? You're not summarizing the plot. You're saying, okay, every book supposedly has a major conflict, and what is it? And I mean, there's no doubt in this one, it's the hat. And there are people that want to kill our major character to get that hat because it's got a lot of money in it. And so that's the major conflict. And he just boiled it down to this 2 or 3 phrase sentence that just grabs you. And I said, oh my gosh, that's perfect. And it needs to go on the cover for the blurb. And it's going to go, of course, into the Amazon page where the description is in bold. And it just nailed it. And I think the phrase he used is he wanted a 10,000-foot view of the book rather than a detailed list of what happens. And that's what I was trying to do. I think every author leads that way.
I think so. And I think that's a very common thing. And I think it's a very common thing to really struggle with the blurb. It is, you're joking about easy writing a book, and I hear that joke. But it is easy to write things when you've got 10,000 words to do it, and difficult when you've got 150 or whatever.
That's
and
right.
which is why tabloid newspaper journalists actually work harder than the guys who write for the Times and New York Times, because they get a lot more time to tell stories. So you've taken that on board. And again, I'll ask that same question. You feel you've learned something about blurb writing, not just specifically about this thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's similar to Stuart's advice in that I want the cover to have a narrative, and that's it. Don't try to tell the story on the cover. Just give it a little bit of the feel of what's going to happen inside. And, Bryan's advice is, where's the conflict? And really hone in on that conflict for your blurb. And, in his advice also, personally for my book, he said maybe I was getting a little too specific with that humor thriller niche, and I don't want to ostracize a regular thriller reader who might be interested in this by saying, oh, it's a zany Florida fiction style book, and they might say, oh, that's not for me, and move on.
Yeah.
So Bryan's advice was perfect, dead on. He's, play to the base, which is thriller readers, and instead of playing to that sort of niche category. So that's, hopefully with all this, I'll expand a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's a very clever bit of blurb that Bryan came up with. And I think one of the things it does is it does both that, because most of it, 2/3 of it is really at that base, at that thriller base. And then it just narrows down towards the end, by which point I think hopefully a thriller person, I think actually a lot of readers reading that blurb will think they quite like to read that book. It's a really appealing description.
I wanted to read it. Yeah. After I read his description, I said, I should go back and read this again. Yeah. But it's fantastic. And his work, he fortunately did the entire blurb for me. So I will keep it as is, because it's just genius. It's pure genius the whole way through. And I know Bryan a little bit off of the show. And I said, man, this is fantastic. I want you to do he's going to do my whole series. So I'm going to contract him, and he's got a special going on right now. So I get to jump in and get a special price. But absolutely fantastic working with him too.
I'm pleased Bryan got a bit of work out of that. He'll get some work from others as well, I think. And again, on the PDF that goes along with this episode is the before and after of that. Okay, which brings us on to not the whole book, because it would have been lovely, for the sake of completion, to hand your entire novel over to an editor to then give us notes on.
Yes.
In reality, we had to work with the look inside sections are, I don't know how they limit it, but it's a fairly chunky size of the opening, isn't it?
I think it's 10%, maybe
10%.
Maybe it's 10%.
That's not.
I'm not sure about that.
So you heard Jenny talk about this. What were your feelings on what she said?
I started with the idea that I would try to broaden the authors that I had mentioned in the blurb. I actually listened to her interview first, and she mentioned that some people might not know some of these writers if they were a UK audience or an international audience. And I said, okay, I'll go and search for some authors. And I did that, and I came up with a list of a few. But then when I got to Bryan's blurb, he had sort of removed those references, and I thought, I kind of like it without them. So I may not put those in there. But I did learn that the author central page on the US site does not automatically propagate to the UK site. You guys were not seeing my author page, but it's there on the US. So I went, and you sign in and it says, oh, is this you? You still have to copy and move over your bio, but now the UK page is there. And I did not know that. I had no idea that was not showing up, and that you have to sort of double the work. So I did go in and
well, that's a good learning point for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And then I had started my sort of publishing career doing a little bit of nonfiction too. I'm a tennis instructor, and so I have a couple of tennis books, and I had put a bio up that was very tennis centric. Well, that has not been my major writing focus. The thriller line, the series, has come through and been my major focus. And I had just forgotten that the bio was like that. So I went in and to her suggestion, I said, things that were much more related to the genre, much more related to my writing, and much more related to the feel that I wanted my readers to get from me. So that's definitely changed. And I loved the part where you guys were talking about Elmore Leonard and his books, because they are a major influence on the style and the tone and, that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed listening to her, and it gave me a lot of really fine points to adjust on my author page. And frankly, I think she liked the look inside portion.
She did, yeah.
But soon after we set that up, I hired an editor to go back through and just polish it one more time. I had bought a fairly inexpensive editor in the beginning, just because it was the beginning. So I went back and hired a professional that I met through the SPF Facebook page and said, look, I want you to go through and a little bit of proofreading, but more story editing and plot editing and that sort of thing. So I think the whole book should click along at a pretty good pace that I think she picked up on and liked, and I appreciated that comment as well.
Yeah, well, I liked it as well. And I think that both of us thought that you somehow, in a quite short period of time, put a lot of character in there. So immediately, Troy became somebody who you liked, was intrigued by, and you kind of got this sense, or which can take a long time to get a sense of a character. I had a sense of him almost straight away. Kind of, I can't believe this is me again. This is happening to me. Being drawn, the reluctant hero type thing, which all came across quite early on, and that's a trick. If to pull that off.
Well, Troy is inspired by a real person, so it's easy to write from that perspective. And it's easy when you have a very defined picture of what a character is, especially when he takes on characteristics that in real life. It's a little bit easier to write it. So I can't say I take all the credit, but at least I put it on paper.
Well, no, it was great and good.
Thank you.
So that was the most difficult, I think, within this framework we've created for Booklab. The most difficult, because you can't rewrite big chunks of the book, but some of that, I guess, what Jenny talked about. Obviously, it's related to your author page and presentation, but some of it might relate to your future writing as well.
The part I think that was most difficult about her interview was the title. The title, and I've agonized over it many times, what to call the book, what to name it. And I went into a formula of 2 words, wanted to keep it really simple and really recognizable. And of course, I named it, again, trying to define the plot, in 2 words. And do I like it? I like it now because it's been there for so long. And I probably won't change it for that reason. I don't want to lose the continuity. And it's funny because I think it'll guide me going forward. What's the name of the book from now on? And I might have some titles that are a little more thriller-esque, because you want that reader to say, ooh, I like that. I want to read that. So that was the toughest part. I agonized over whether to change it or to fix it or mess with it a little bit. But it's been there so long that I think it's tough to go backwards, but I can definitely take that advice and go forwards.
And hat check, the pun or the double meaning refers to checking your hat as you go into a restaurant or something. Is that
correct?
Okay,
correct.
So I don't think that translates into UK particularly well. We don't use the word. Yeah. We do actually, because most American language is being used every day here now, just because of TV and everything. But don't know. It didn't quite resonate with me either. Yeah. It didn't quite work. But anyway, and I think that's one of Jenny's fears. Actually, was good writer. You can build yourself a good career, but she worried a bit about how you would travel internationally.
Yeah, and I definitely thought she was spot on. The whole, even the spelling of check is quite different, and when you look at it, it's most certainly. It's very American, obviously, and that unfortunately is my bias, writing from that perspective, that I didn't think of that. But it's nice that she's alerted me to that, and I've said to myself, I need to consider those things. And it's very odd because I just ran a couple of ads with A/B testing, and I tried to think of an international audience, and the one that I actually spoke a little more internationally is performing way better. So who knows? It could just be a simple change of a few phrases here and there that lead people to be more comfortable with it internationally. And I mean, any sale is a good sale. So absolutely.
It's good for the import market. Good for the
exactly.
The trade deficit over there.
Yeah, exactly.
Every bit helps.
That's right.
Brilliant. It's been great talking to you, David. You're out there in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Knoxville, Tennessee. East Tennessee, eastern United States. Yeah, beautiful sunny weather. You can see I had to try to close down all the blinds.
It's been awful here today. And you're a tennis guy. I hope your tennis school is called Don't Go for Tennessee, Get a Tennis A. Is it called that?
It's not, but I'm writing it down.
Okay.
I'm writing it down.
You can have that one for free. But
thank you, James.
That's brilliant. Well, look, stay in touch, David. We'd love to see how you progress. You can. So this will go out shortly. In fact, I'll liaise with you exactly when it's going to go out, and I think from that point onwards, you're free to launch everything and put everything into place, and we'll see what difference it makes to those numbers.
Excellent. James, it's been fantastic. If there was a product called Booklab, I would buy it again for every book that I've been in. Just the knowledge, the absolute expertise, and I mean, just within a few minutes, nailed down things that I honestly do feel like will change a lot of what this series looks like. And any good positive change you can make, you can only expect great things from that. So it's been a blast. It's been really fun and a great learning experience. So thank you for choosing me. So
you've been an absolutely perfect first victim of Booklab, and we're really pleased about it. So
thank you very much.
There you go. I hope you liked my joke about the name of his tennis school should be Don't Get a Tennessee, Get a Tennis A.
Good God.
I'm on fire. The book laboratory. The book laboratory. That's all I'm going to say. There you go. So David was really thrilled to get this. And, you can tell a lot by the way someone takes criticism. And this is effective, although it was nicely delivered by lovely people. It is effectively criticism. And we do get, you and I, funnily enough, we did have an email yesterday, did we not? From somebody who said that he could not learn anything from you, has nothing to learn. And we both clicked on his link to his books, and it was possibly the worst author website I've ever seen in my life. It was.
I'm struggling to think of any worse than that. And the covers also were absolutely diabolical.
Were terrible. And actually, when you read what they were, he's got a thriller series that has some legs potentially to it. And I'm thinking, you're sitting there on a potential thousands of pounds of income a year. Don't tell people you've learned everything you don't. Well, they're potentially.
To be honest, I didn't look that far because he was. Yeah, you couldn't. Everything else was so poor. No one is going to look that far. So you went further than I did. But yeah, no, it's important. You need to be able to take criticism from people who are in a position to give useful advice. And obviously, David is wise enough to see that. And we've got some really talented people working on Booklab. And he that would have cost. I don't know how much it would have cost to get that kind of advice. The time they would have spent on his book and suggesting those improvements. But that's certainly 4 figures for the 3 of them. So he got all that, and of course that he's sensible now. He's going to think about it. He's not obliged to take them. He take the advice. He can think about it, muse on it, and decide to go another way if he wants to. But to people who we get quite a lot of these people who will say, I know better. Well, okay, fair enough. Yeah. Maybe you do. But I've sold 1 million books. I doubt. Joe Bloggs, who emailed us yesterday, sold more than a handful. But so there you go. But it's up to him. He's completely within his right to tell me where to go and to just strike out on his own path.
And in contrast, David Berens is all smiles, loved it, and couldn't wait to implement the advice he got. It was a big difference.
Oh, we saw a lovely picture with him as well with his SPF mug. It was
yes,
very nice to see.
He he posted a picture on Facebook just to say how pleased he's been with the whole process. And so I will now, we'll give it a couple of weeks. We'll give it a week for this podcast to get the majority of its listens out the way, and then I'm going to give him the green light to change everything. And of course, we're going to keep in touch with David and find out in the future what difference it's made to his sales, because that is ultimately what this is all about. It's all about converting all that effort you put into writing a book, converting that into sales of the book, so that you can fund your life with book sales.
Well, I expect the next interview will be with him on a yacht. That's the that's the plan.
Good. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, because I really think it's been a great idea that I had some time ago to come up with this Booklab.
You're fired.
And just to reiterate that, I have control of the nozzles here. I can twizzle your knob and turn you down.
Oh God.
Just to tell you that if you want a chance of being the next victim of our Booklab, you can go to patreon.com/SPF Podcast and sign up to be a gold level supporter of the podcast. I mean, you don't just get the opportunity to get in the Booklab. You also get an SPF pin.
I've seen them and they're great.
Are they?
They're really nice. Yeah. So we call them badges in the UK. If we say badge in the US, people won't know what we're talking about. So they're pins or badges, same thing really, but they look great. And for things like meetups, like at LBF, we'll give a few of those out, I think, to people who go to LBF and RWA and NINC for the rest of the year. But they're really nice. Something you can just pop on your lapel if you want to. And also you get, what else do you get, James? We pick, someone gets both the courses, don't they?
Yes, to get an opportunity. So we give the 101 course away and the ads course for the gold level subscribers. Silver, it's just 101. So one person gets
so not everyone gets those.
No.
We pick one lucky winner.
You automatically get sent all the downloads and all the books as they appear. So in fact, Damon Courtney emailed not just me, but everybody who's a BookFunnel member to say that they have linked BookFunnel to Patreon, which is fantastic. So we can now automatically deliver the books to our gold level supporters. So Catherine, our VA, and I are going to work out the mechanics of that. So a really good little thing. I love these companies that are constantly innovating. And just on that note, Draft to Digital this week have also announced quite a good set of innovations. And we had Kevin Tumlinson posting videos into their Facebook group. So check out Draft to Digital. Can you remember what that innovation is? Because I've now started this sentence.
Author pages, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. That's what it is. Yep. It's author pages. Good. We'll catch up with the D2D guys at some point, probably in the States this year, because they're always around. They may even do their karaoke again, which they did in Florida last year. You missed that, Mark. So if you've just check out The Voice, get yourself ready.
No one wants to hear that. Trust me.
Okay. Look, we've managed to get through a whole episode without mentioning John Milton's escapades in Salisbury, but it's getting worldwide attention. Salisbury has never been so famous.
No, we had the Prime Minister here yesterday. We've had press helicopters overhead for most of the week. And I discovered yesterday that I know the people who discovered the two on the bench.
Wow.
They're parents at the school my daughter goes to. So
keep your distance.
Yes, exactly. It's all pretty weird at the moment, but calming down a little bit. And just after this, I'm going to do a broadcast to my readers. I'm trying to do Friday Facebook Lives now for the readers, and that is something that I know will come up. There's a lot of people who are interested in that. So
yeah, you're broadcasting to the Dawson's Creek. Did you like that?
It's very good. It's very good. Yes, I was asking for those who didn't see. I was asking for people to give me an idea for a name for the show as I'll probably look at it. Had maybe 150 suggestions between my readers and the SPF Facebook group. So got some good ones in there. That, unfortunately, although very funny, James, is not going to be the one I pick.
Dawson's Creek. I guess Dawson's Creek is a few years old now, so it might be might date. Mind you, your readers are all old. Okay, good. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Thank you very much indeed, particularly to our three guest contributors. Bryan, as you heard in the interview, got some work out of this because David Berens immediately placed an order for Bryan to do the blurb for all his other books. And that's what Bryan does. So if that's piqued your interest in that service as well, and Bryan is fantastic at that, so you can get hold of Bryan. I mean, just bryancohen.com. Should we check that?
Best page forward.
Best page forward, of course, that's Bryan.
Yeah.
So thank you to Bryan, thank you to Jenny Parrot, and thank you to Stuart Bache. Bache, I always struggled to say his surname, for that, and particularly for Dave for being a good sport. We are about to go into our Patreon Gold. We'll give it a couple of weeks if you want to sign up. Go into our list, and we're going to choose our next person, because I can't wait to get going and do this all again. Good. Keep away from the nerve agent, and we shall see you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.